One of the strongest tablets today in the market is the iPad Air 2. The iPad Air 2 has launched more than half a year ago, and yet, it's one of the best tablets in the market. It has a beautiful design, amazing display, strong processor, and awesome camera. But should you really upgrade to it? What there is about it that's so different than the iPad Air or any other iPad? I'm Rory Philstein in Rory Tech, and today I'm gonna do a review about the iPad Air 2. The design of the iPad Air 2 is just beautiful, but it's very similar to the iPad Air. It has an aluminium unibody in the back, and in the front there is glass. The iPad Air 2 is very thin. In fact, it is just 6.1 mm thin, while the iPad Air is 7.5. It's also 18% thinner than the iPad Air, and the iPad Air was 20% thinner than the iPad before it. It's very light also. The iPad Air weighs 469 grams, while the iPad Air 2 is 437 grams. So you actually can call it iPad 2 Air. The iPad Air 2 comes in three colors: gold, silver, and space gray. I've got the silver model in 16GB. There's also 64 or 128 GB. So in the end, if you like the design of the aluminium, the thin and the lightness of the iPad Air, so you're gonna even more like the design of the iPad Air 2. The iPad Air 2 has a 9.7-inch Retina display with a resolution of 2048 by 1536, giving it 264 pixels per inch. Now, it's saving the same specs as the iPad Air, but according to Apple, this is an improved Retina display. In the display of the iPad Air 2, there is no more air between the display and the panel, which makes the display thinner in the iPad Air 2, and it also makes 56% less reflectivity than any iPad. So not only the display is thinner, it's also more readable in the sunlight. So the display in the iPad Air 2 is keeping of the same amazing Retina display that were in any iPad and just make it better. iPad Air 2 comes with Apple's new chip that's called A8X, which is an improved version of the A8 that came with the iPhone 6. A8X is a 64-bit chip built on a technology of 20 nanometers and has 3 billion transistors. Now, one thing that Apple made good with this iPad Air 2 is to add more RAM. Every iPhone and iPad until today came with 1 GB of RAM, and the iPad Air 2 is the first to break that line, and it has 2 GB of RAM. Now, that's very good because it means we can use this hardware and software in a better way, activate more windows, and multitasking that very improved with iOS 9 is now working even better with iPad Air 2. Now, checking in Geekbench shows that iPad Air 2, iPhone 6, and iPad Air, the iPad Air 2 is actually stronger than the iPad Air and stronger than the iPhone 6 that had A8 chip. According to Apple, the A8X is faster in 40% and stronger in 2.5 times more than the A8, A7. Now, that means you can work smoother and faster with your iPad Air 2. Now, iPad Air 2 has a M8 motion core processor and a gyroscope, so that's one piece of machine. Now, according to battery, because it's thin designed, Apple had to reduce the battery size, but because of the new chip, you can save yourself like up to 10 hours of battery life. iPad Air 2 is also faster wireless. iPad Air 2 has a 150 megabit per second download speed, so it's much faster in downloading files and surfing the internet. The camera on the iPad Air 2 are one of its best features. It's amazingly improved, and in fact, it's almost as good as the iPhone camera. It has 8 megapixel camera with an f2.4 aperture and a large 1.12 micron size pixels. It also has burst mode, let us take up to 10 images a second, and it also has 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera with an f2.2 aperture, let 81% more light in the image. So I'm gonna show you some photos that took with the iPad Air 2 and the iPad Air in the same situation, and you can see that the camera has improved amazingly, and the 8 megapixel sensor really does the job. Now in low light shot you can see that it is impossible to shoot with the iPad Air 2 from the simple reason that it doesn't have an LED flash like any other iPhone of Apple. Now in video recording, the iPad Air 2 has some great features. It has a 1080p video recording and a 720p slow motion recording at 120 frames per second. It also has a FaceTime HD camera at 720p, and it also has the time-lapse feature that announced with the iOS 8. So I'm gonna show you some videos took with the iPad Air 2. And just for the ending, I want to say that the iPad Air 2 is a great camera, and it has very improved since the first iPad Air, but still LED flash wouldn't be harmful for him. That, by the way, a lot of tablets today has an LED flash. Now in the iPad Air 2 we also have the fingerprint scanner from Apple Touch ID that we have in the iPhone since the iPhone 5S. Let us unlock the iPhone easily and fast. Now in the iPad Air I've got iOS 9 Beta 3, and in the iPad Air 2 I've got iOS 8.4, and we have some improvement here in iOS 9. We've got a new search with Siri suggestion. We have a new multitasking. Let us work on iPad Air with two multiple windows, and in iPad Air 2 you can actually work with half screen and equal view of any window. We also have a new Notes app and a new News app, and we also have Apple Music, which is available since iOS 8.4. Now the iPad Air 2 has launched with the iPad Mini 3, which is specs is almost identical to the iPad Mini 2, but it has a new 3 colors and Touch ID. So that was the iPad Air 2, with improved display, much better processor, faster wireless, better camera, Touch ID, and a thin and a light design. Now if you have an iPad Air, so maybe it's not so worth it to spend so much money about the iPad Air 2. It starts in something like $499, and in cellular it's going up to $629. But if you have a fourth generation iPad or third generation iPad, so I really recommended you to try the iPad Air 2. It's an entirely different experience. It is thin and light, and it's the ultimate experience of iPad from Apple. So thank you guys, I was Rory Philstein in Rory Tech, and I'll see you in the next video.